I remember the day I first walked into TechVantage as if it were yesterday. It was 15 years ago, but the memories are still vivid in my mind. The excitement of joining a cutting-edge tech company, one that was at the forefront of innovation, made me feel like I had finally found my place. I was young then, full of ideas, driven by a desire to make a difference in the tech world. At 40, I believed I was just beginning my journey, though little did I know how difficult that journey would become. Now at 55, I can look back on my career with a mix of pride and frustration. TechVantage was once my home, a place where I poured my heart and soul into every line of code, every algorithm I crafted. But today, I don't recognize the company I once knew. It has changed, or perhaps I have changed. It's hard to tell anymore. For all its advancements in technology, TechVantage still operates like many big corporations, valuing the bottom line more than the people who made the company great. The culture here was one that promised creativity, but only if you were young enough to fit into the ideal image of innovation. In the past decade, I've watched as younger engineers and managers, many with less experience and far fewer accomplishments, were promoted while people like me, who had been there from the beginning, were pushed to the sidelines. It wasn't always like this. When I first arrived, there was a sense of camaraderie, a feeling that every contribution, no matter how small, was valued. My department, the research division, was filled with brilliant minds who shared a vision to change the tech world. It wasn't about age or seniority, it was about the work. The work was everything. At least it used to be. I'd like to say that I adapted to the changing atmosphere easily, but I didn't. I struggled more than I care to admit. The younger engineers had a way of speaking in a language I didn't fully understand, buzzwords, trends, and terms that seemed designed to make me feel out of place. They didn't respect the foundation I had helped build. They wanted to do things their way, quickly, without understanding the value of the deep research and careful thought that had gone into our projects. That's where the tension began, when the younger crowd started questioning my methods, the methods that had brought success to TechVantage. I had always believed in the power of distributed processing, a method that could revolutionize data handling, making it more efficient and scalable. And I was right. The distributed processing algorithm I created is still at the heart of TechVantage's flagship product, AccountSphere. This algorithm has powered countless businesses, including more than 40% of the companies in the Fortune 500. It's what makes AccountSphere the trusted software for accounting and data management. But despite this, I wasn't always recognized for my work. There was always an underlying tension in the air, something unspoken but deeply felt. While I watched others get the credit and recognition, I kept my head down, focusing on the work. It was enough for me, or so I told myself. I was doing what I loved, and that's all that mattered, right? But it was harder and harder to ignore the signs. The younger generation of engineers, who lacked the experience and understanding of how the core of the product worked, started taking on leadership roles. They began presenting my algorithm as if it were their own, tweaking a few things here and there, but never giving me the credit I deserved. They didn't even know the intricacies of the code. They just understood the marketing potential, the product's user interface, and its profitability. Still, I kept my head down. I convinced myself that it wasn't about the credit. It was about the impact of the work. But then something happened that changed everything. Something I couldn't ignore. The email came by accident, as it often does. A thread meant for senior management. An email that slipped through the cracks and landed in my inbox. It was a simple note, nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. But as I read it, my heart sank. We're going to move forward with restructuring and consolidating departments. We'll be letting go of some people. I wasn't naive. I knew what that meant. The company was moving in a new direction. And I, along with many others who had been with the company for years, was now expendable. I thought back to all the years I had dedicated to TechVantage, how I had sacrificed time, energy, and a lot of personal life for the company. And now I was just another name on a list. I wasn't even surprised. I had seen it coming for months. That day, I didn't even show my shock. I didn't shed a tear or voice any protests. I had been preparing for this moment. I had known it was coming. As soon as I saw that email, everything fell into place. I knew I had become irrelevant in their eyes, just a part of the old guard that no longer fit in the shiny, fast-paced future they envisioned for themselves. And yet I wasn't angry. I was calm, almost relieved, because in truth I had already made my plans. TechVantage may have thought they were moving in a new direction, but I had already begun moving in mine. I had anticipated this day, and while they were busy making their decisions, I had quietly been working on something of my own. The algorithm that they thought they owned, that they believed they could control and market under their brand, it was mine. The improvements I made to the algorithm in my spare time on my own equipment were mine. I had already filed a patent for it, and it had been granted just recently. So, while TechVantage was in the middle of a corporate shakeup, I was securing my future. I was done being invisible. This was my world now, a world where I controlled my own destiny, where I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I had worked too long, too hard to be anyone's second choice. And TechVantage, the company I had helped build, would soon realize just how much they had lost when they pushed me out. But for now it was just me, my patent, and the knowledge that my future was no longer tied to their corporate games. It was time for a new beginning. I walked into the conference room as though I were simply attending another routine meeting. There were no surprises, no nervous anticipation. After all, I had already seen this coming. The small glass-walled room, with its sterile white walls and long rectangular table, felt like a courtroom now, silent and cold. The only thing that differed from my initial years at TechVantage was the look on their faces. Margaret Thomas was seated at the far end, her hands neatly folded in front of her. Dylan from HR stood next to her, a manila folder in his hands, his eyes unable to meet mine. His posture was rigid, betraying his discomfort. Both of them wore the same expression of professional regret, one I had become too familiar with over the past few months. It was the look that preceded bad news, the kind of news that no one wanted to give but was inevitable all the same. "Grace," Margaret began, her voice smooth and controlled, but with a hint of something almost imperceptible, a satisfaction perhaps or relief. "As you know, TechVantage is restructuring its operations, and we're making some significant changes. Unfortunately, your position no longer aligns with the new direction the company is taking." I could feel my heart beat steadily, but my chest didn't tighten. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I knew this day would come. This was just the formality of it, the official declaration of what I had already accepted. After all, the decision had been made long before this meeting. "The research division is being consolidated under the product development team," she continued, offering an expression that seemed carefully rehearsed. "We want to emphasize innovation with younger, more agile leadership." I nodded, giving her the satisfaction of thinking I was absorbing the words, but in truth, I had already stopped listening. It wasn't the first time they had pulled this card, and it wouldn't be the last. "Age, youth, the same old story. We'll be offering you a severance package," Dylan chimed in, his voice lacking the warmth he was trying so hard to convey. 2 weeks for every year of service, continued health coverage for 3 months, and a list of career counseling resources. I looked at the manila folder Dylan pushed toward me but made no move to open it. I didn't need to see what was inside. I had already prepared my exit strategy. The company had already failed me, failed to recognize the value of what I had created for them. And now they thought they could just move on, sweep me out of the door like dust under a rug. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, professional, calm, as it should be. "I completely understand." Margaret and Dylan exchanged a glance, clearly surprised by my composed reaction. I wasn't who they expected. They were waiting for anger, for tears, for something more emotional than this cold acceptance. But I wasn't interested in drama. I had already made my peace with it. This wasn't a setback for me. It was the end of a chapter, and I was about to start a new one. "Is there anything else?" I asked, looking up from the folder. My tone was matter-of-fact. Margaret, clearly thrown by my calmness, recovered quickly. "No, that will be all. We just need your keycard, company laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon." My team. The team I had nurtured for years, the brilliant engineers I had handpicked and mentored. They didn't deserve this. I didn't want them to be collateral damage in this corporate game, but there was no avoiding it. I'd given them my best, and I hoped they would understand that. I'd made sure to prepare them too. "Of course," I said, rising from my seat. "I'll gather my things." As I left the room, I passed the executive conference room. Through the glass I could see Victor Lawson, the CEO, holding court. He was gesturing wildly at a PowerPoint presentation that was titled, Q3 revenue projections. Victor, the man who had taken credit for my algorithm at last year's industry conference, referring to me only as one of the research team members. He had no idea how much he was about to lose. I walked to my office, my mind already shifting. Friday was my last day at TechVantage. The exit interviews, the knowledge transfer meetings, and the goodbyes, it all passed in a blur. It wasn't that I didn't care, but I had more important things on my mind. The pieces were already in place. I had already secured my future, and now it was time to close this chapter and move forward. I had made plans long before this day. I wasn't the one left behind. I wasn't the one losing. On Thursday afternoon, I packed my office, family photos, conference badges, my coffee mug from the team's last Christmas party. The little things. The personal items that I would take with me as reminders of my time here, but also as symbols of the life I was leaving behind. Margaret came by again, standing at the door with a forced casualness, leaning against the doorframe. "I just wanted to check that everything is clear for your departure," she said, her voice too light, too careful. I smiled and nodded, wrapping my award, the one that was now attached to the very algorithm they were so eager to discard, into a layer of tissue paper. The irony was not lost on me. The very algorithm that had become their flagship product, the one they had failed to patent, was now my personal property. "Crystal clear," I replied, placing the award gently in my box. This was the last time I would be pushed aside. Margaret hesitated for a moment, the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. But she quickly masked it. "You know, Grace, these restructuring decisions are never personal. Victor feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction." I looked at her, locking eyes. "I understand completely. Business is business." Something in my tone made her pause, but it was gone in a flash. She turned to leave, her mind already on the next task. Well, good luck with that. Friday came, and with it the finality of it all. I cleared my desk, left my office, and handed over my keycard to security. But as I walked out of the building for the last time, I didn't feel defeated. I felt liberated. I had given everything to TechVantage, but now it was time for me to take control of my own future. At Meridian, the upscale restaurant where I met Gregory Sullivan, I couldn't help but smile. Here I wasn't just an employee. I was the creator. "I think they're going to regret this," Gregory said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're already a legend in the industry, and they never even realized it." I glanced down at the papers inside the folder, the exclusive licensing rights to my algorithm, and signed them without hesitation. The press release would go live on Monday, and with it, the world would finally know what TechVantage had so foolishly let slip through their fingers. Gregory raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. "To owning your own value," I replied, clinking my glass against his. The future was mine now. And Monday, my first day as Chief Innovation Officer at Precision Systems, was only the beginning. My first few days at Precision Systems were surreal. Walking into the sleek, modern office felt like stepping into a new world, one where my skills and experience were valued, where my ideas were not only heard but actively sought. The energy in the air was electric. People respected the work I had done, and there was a sense of gratitude that had been sorely missing in my old life at TechVantage. It was a fresh start, a place where I could finally thrive, not just survive. As the newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer, I was given free rein to steer the company's research and development efforts in a direction that would build on my work with distributed processing. The company was hungry for growth, and they understood the value of the technology one had created. But the moment that would truly set the tone for this new chapter came unexpectedly. On the very first day, I began working alongside my new colleagues. The room was filled with eager faces, all waiting for me to present my vision for the company's future. We were in the middle of an initial brainstorming session when I heard a voice behind me, a voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Grace." I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway. Paul Richards, my former colleague from TechVantage. The very same man who had always downplayed my ideas, doubted my vision, and constantly undermined my work. Paul had been part of the group that perpetually overlooked the true value of what I brought to the table. His cold, dismissive attitude toward my algorithm had always rubbed me the wrong way, but I never thought much of it. After all, in a company like TechVantage, you were used to having your ideas stolen or ignored. But now, seeing him here standing in front of me, No longer just a mid-level engineer but a director at one of TechVantage's biggest competitors. Something clicked. He looked surprised, even a bit unsettled. There was a moment of hesitation as his eyes scanned me up and down, clearly taken aback by the transformation. Grace Williams, the woman who had been passed over for promotions, whose work had been dismissed as insignificant, was now the Chief Innovation Officer at Precision Systems, and she held the rights to the very algorithm he had once ridiculed. "I didn't know you'd be joining us," Paul said, his tone polite but strained, as if he were trying to mask the discomfort that was radiating off him. I smiled, the irony of the situation not lost on me. "I'm sure it's a surprise to many," I replied coolly. "But here I am." Paul shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room before he composed himself again. "Well, it's good to see you," he said, though his words felt empty. "You've come a long way." "A long way. A long way indeed." From the engineer who was sidelined in every meeting to the woman who had taken control of her own fate. From being invisible at TechVantage to now leading an entire department at one of the most cutting-edge tech companies in the world. But there was something else in Paul's eyes, something that made me pause. Was it envy? Regret? It was hard to tell. I didn't push the issue. After all, this was my moment, not his. But as I walked past him to take my seat at the head of the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than I had realized. Had Paul known something about the company's plans to sabotage my work? Had he, along with others at TechVantage, done more than just ignore my contributions? The nagging thought lingered at the back of my mind. Had he been part of the effort to slow down my progress, to make sure my algorithm never got the recognition it deserved? The meetings in the first week at Precision Systems were intense. But despite the full schedule, I could feel a shift in myself. The weight of the years I spent being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed was lifting with every day that passed. This was my time now. I was no longer bound by the expectations of a company that had never truly understood the value of my work. At Precision Systems, my skills were not only respected but celebrated. But with this newfound freedom came a sense of responsibility. I wasn't just leading a department. I was paving the way for the future of the company. The ideas I had once kept to myself, the innovations I had nurtured in silence, were now being realized and expanded upon. The distributed processing algorithm was no longer just an idea I had been passionate about. It was becoming the cornerstone of Precision Systems' future products. And the best part? It was my name, my face, and my vision that were now being associated with its success. However, before I could fully embrace this new role, I had unfinished business with my past. In the final days at TechVantage, I had maintained my composure through every exit interview and knowledge transfer meeting. I made sure to document every project I had worked on, every line of code I had written, every password and process that had once been part of my daily routine. I was meticulous, leaving no stone unturned. My purpose wasn't just to be thorough, it was to make sure there was no question about who had created what. I knew TechVantage would want to claim ownership of everything I had done, as they had done countless times before. But this time it was different. I was prepared. I had my patent. My algorithm, the one they thought was theirs to exploit, was now legally mine. My intellectual property was safe, and with it, my future was secured. I had taken the necessary steps to protect myself and my work, and I wasn't about to let them claim what they didn't own. Before leaving the company for good, I made sure to clarify things with HR just to leave no room for doubt. In one final conversation with Dylan, I emphasized that any intellectual property developed outside of working hours, using my personal equipment, was my sole property. I even showed him the timestamped development logs that detailed my work outside company time, clearly outlining how I had developed and improved upon the algorithm independently. The meeting was quick, and Dylan's discomfort was palpable as I spoke. I was no longer the person they could walk over. I wasn't the woman who would accept whatever scraps they tossed my way. I had made my choice and I would never go back. As I packed my things from my desk, taking the last remnants of my career at TechVantage, I realized just how far I had come. The photo of my team, the awards, the conference badges, they were no longer symbols of what I had achieved within the company. They were now reminders of the struggle, of the years I had spent waiting for recognition that never came. But now, in this new chapter, the recognition was mine. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My journey was just beginning. With everything in place and the future secured, I looked ahead to my next challenge at Precision Systems. I was no longer bound by the past, no longer confined to the shadow of a company that didn't see my worth. I was free, and I was ready to make my mark on the world. In the coming weeks, the rest of the tech world would see exactly what I was capable of. It was a strange feeling walking out of Tech Vantage for the final time. The day was crisp, the air felt sharp and fresh, but it couldn't erase the weight that had been lifted from my shoulders. I had spent 15 years at that company, investing everything I had into making it succeed, only to be tossed aside like an afterthought. But in leaving, I realized something. I wasn't defined by Tech Vantage. I was defined by my ability to create, to lead, and to own my worth. My last day at Tech Vantage was not filled with drama or anger. It was filled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done everything right. Everything was wrapped up, neatly packed away, and fully documented. As the hours ticked down to my departure, I sat in my office carefully reviewing my work. Every project I had ever been a part of, every process I had designed, every password, every access point, I wrote it all down. Meticulously. This wasn't just about leaving behind an organized desk, it was about leaving behind a record. One that proved the value of my contributions and protected my intellectual property. For years, Tech Vantage had taken my work for granted. They had claimed credit for innovations that were clearly mine. But this time they wouldn't be able to erase me so easily. As I typed up the final sections of my documentation, I felt a sense of peace. I had covered all my bases. I had already taken steps to ensure that my distributed processing algorithm, the very one they had failed to patent, was legally mine. The last thing I wanted was to allow them to claim ownership over something that had come from my mind on my time. I had filed the patent independently, and the documentation I'd left behind at Tech Vantage made it clear that the development process had been done outside of working hours, on my personal equipment. The final conversation with Dylan from HR had been brief but essential. I made sure to clarify that all intellectual property I had developed on my own time, using my own resources, remained my personal property. They couldn't take it. They couldn't claim it. Not this time. As I packed up my desk, I looked at the items in front of me: papers, pictures, mementos. They had all been part of my journey at Tech Vantage, but they no longer felt like mine. They belonged to the version of me that had been kept in the shadows for too long. The version of me that didn't know her worth. Now the only things I needed to carry with me were the lessons learned, the growth I had achieved, and the future that awaited me. I walked out of that building with my head held high. But it wasn't just a simple exit. It was a declaration. I had nothing left to prove to Tech Vantage. I was free. And now my real work would begin. A few weeks passed, and Precision Systems quickly became my new home. I was embraced by a team that recognized my value and celebrated my ideas. The work was exhilarating. Every day, I was surrounded by people who were eager to collaborate, who truly believed in what I could bring to the table. And as for my algorithm, it was flourishing. The performance improvements I had made were taking Precision Systems to new heights. I had done what I always dreamed of: taking ownership of my work and seeing it realized on a scale I never thought possible. But just as I was beginning to settle into my new life, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox. It was from Richard Donovan, the newly appointed CEO of Tech Vantage, the man who had taken over after Victor Lawson's abrupt departure. My first reaction was skepticism. Why would Richard reach out to me now after all this time? After everything that had happened? The email was short, but its contents left me reeling. Grace, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to personally congratulate you on your new position at Precision Systems. I've been following your work, and I can't help but admire your drive and ingenuity. However, there is something important I need to bring to your attention. As part of my restructuring of Tech Vantage, we've conducted an internal review, and certain actions by the previous leadership have come to light. Specifically, it appears that Victor Lawson and other executives were involved in manipulating the records regarding the intellectual property you developed during your time at the company. In fact, it seems they deliberately mishandled the patent application process for your algorithm. We believe they were attempting to claim ownership of your work, bypassing legal protocols in an effort to assert control over something that was rightfully yours. I'm writing to inform you that I have already begun an investigation into these actions, and I want to ensure you that your contributions will not go unrecognized. I'm aware of the value you brought to Tech Vantage, and I want to make sure this issue is resolved properly. If you are open to it, I would appreciate a conversation to discuss how we can move forward. Sincerely, Richard Donovan, CEO TechVantage. At first, I sat there in stunned silence. I had known something was off with TechVantage's handling of my patent. The way they treated my work, the lack of acknowledgement, it all felt like something was being deliberately suppressed. But to hear that Victor and others had actually manipulated the patent process was both shocking and validating. They had tried to steal what was mine. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of vindication wash over me. I wasn't crazy. I had known something was wrong. I had suspected that the internal politics at TechVantage went far deeper than anyone realized. And now, here was the confirmation. Victor, the man who had belittled my work and taken credit for my algorithm in public, had known exactly what he was doing when he left me behind. He wasn't just trying to replace me. He was trying to erase me from the company's history entirely. The email from Richard continued to resonate in my mind, stirring something deep inside me. There was a part of me, a part that had been silenced for years, that wanted to go back and fight. I wanted to confront Victor, expose him for the fraud he was. I wanted to remind him and everyone else that I was the one who had created the technology that made TechVantage successful. I was the one who had laid the foundation for their flagship product. But as tempting as it was, I also knew that returning to TechVantage meant dipping back into the toxicity that had nearly destroyed me in the first place. Richard's email had left me with a choice. He had offered me the chance to right the wrongs of the past, to come back and claim what was mine. But did I want to go back? Was it worth the fight? Could I really walk into that building again and face the very people who had ignored me, dismissed me, and tried to steal from me? I knew the decision wouldn't be easy, but as I stared at the email, I realized that I didn't need to go back to make my point. I didn't need to fight for recognition. I had already earned it and I was living it. But what if? What if I could use this opportunity to set a precedent for the future? What if I could finally expose the way TechVantage had exploited their employees, especially those like me who had been pushed aside simply because we didn't fit the company's image of innovation? The thoughts swirled in my mind, and as I sat there pondering my next move, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over yet. The chaos at TechVantage unfolded rapidly. In the weeks following my departure, I watched from a distance as the company crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. The absence of the distributed processing algorithm, the algorithm that powered their flagship product, was felt immediately. They had always relied on the technology one had created, but they had failed to recognize its true value. Now that technology was in the hands of Precision Systems, and TechVantage had no way to recreate it. I had known this would happen, but seeing it unfold was something else entirely. The company's response was nothing short of desperation. They initially attempted to negotiate with Precision Systems, hoping to secure a licensing deal for the use of my algorithm. However, the terms I had set were non-negotiable. Precision Systems had full control now. The ball was in my court. As reports started to pour in, it became clear that TechVantage was facing a major crisis. They didn't just lose the algorithm, they lost their competitive edge. The product that had once been their golden goose, the one that accounted for their dominance in the market, was now effectively crippled without my technology. The cost to develop a similar product from scratch was astronomical. Experts estimated that it would take years to recreate the core of AccountSphere, and even then the result would be far less efficient. The stock price plummeted. Investors began pulling out. Clients questioned the stability of the company, and TechVantage, once a leader in the industry, was now scrambling to save face. The crisis became public when TechVantage's general counsel and CFO were caught in heated meetings with the board of directors. The legal department frantically reviewed old contracts, trying to find a way to claim ownership over the intellectual property they had failed to protect. It was all too late. While they were fighting to salvage what was left, I was thriving at Precision Systems. As for my team, those brilliant engineers I had mentored and worked with for years, they too had made the transition with me. Each one of them, as I had promised, was given a position at Precision Systems, and they were now in roles with substantial raises and promotions. I had never intended for them to be left behind when I left TechVantage. They were my family, my partners in innovation, and I would make sure they were rewarded for their loyalty, their brilliance, and their hard work. It was exhilarating to see them rise through the ranks at Precision Systems. Miguel, the lead developer who had helped me perfect the algorithm, was promoted to lead innovation officer in charge of all future product development using our technology. Lena, who had been with me since the beginning, was now managing a team of her own, driving the integration of the algorithm into new product lines. We had all left behind the shackles of TechVantage, and now we were finally in a place where we could create freely, without the oppressive shadow of corporate greed hanging over us. Our work was valued, our voices were heard, and our potential was being recognized. At Precision Systems, the distributed processing algorithm was revolutionizing industries. Our clients included Fortune 500 companies, and the impact we were making was being felt across the entire tech sector. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I wasn't just another cog in the machine, I was driving the machine forward. A year passed in the blink of an eye. The journey from TechVantage to Precision Systems had been filled with challenges, but it had also been filled with triumphs. I had gone from being an invisible cog in a corporate machine to becoming a leader in a rapidly growing tech company. And the best part? I had done it all on my own terms. Under my leadership, Precision Systems became a powerhouse in the industry. The technology we developed didn't just change the way businesses operated. It reshaped the future of tech. Our growth was exponential. We attracted more clients, expanded our product lines, and brought in strategic partners that helped elevate the company to new heights. But even more satisfying than the financial success was the way Precision Systems had become a place where people like me could thrive. People who were innovative, driven, and passionate about creating something truly groundbreaking. The year culminated in a celebration, a year-end anniversary party organized by Gregory Sullivan, our CEO. He had always been an unwavering supporter of mine, and now, after a year of unprecedented growth and success, it felt like the perfect time to reflect on how far we had come. As I stood in front of the crowd of my colleagues, team members, and industry partners at the lavish dinner, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gregory raised his glass, his smile wide and full of pride. "To Grace," he said, "the woman who not only gave us the distributed processing algorithm, but who has also taught us the true meaning of leadership, innovation, and perseverance." The applause was deafening, and for a moment I couldn't believe it. This was the recognition I had always longed for, but had never received. I smiled, raised my glass, and joined the toast. "To owning your own value," I said, looking around the room at my team, "and to building something that will last." The evening was filled with laughter, celebration, and camaraderie. As I looked around at the faces of my team, I realized that this success wasn't just mine. It was all of ours. We had built this together. And now we were finally getting the recognition we deserved. Later that night, after the guests had left and the lights had dimmed, Gregory and I shared a quiet moment in the back office. "It's been a hell of a year, huh?" he said with a grin. I nodded, my mind drifting to everything I had achieved in such a short time. "It has. And it's only just the beginning." As we clinked our glasses in a private toast, I knew that this success, this recognition, wasn't just about the past year. It was about the journey that had led me here, the lessons learned, the sacrifices made, and the battles fought. But most importantly, it was about never giving up. Because when you believe in yourself, when you trust in your abilities, you can overcome anything. And that was the lesson I hoped to share with everyone in the room that night, and with anyone who had ever felt like they were overlooked, dismissed, or ignored. This was my time, and it was only going to get better from here.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.